Hello, I'm Leela34, and this is going to be a 5-minute book review. I've just finished a book, and I want to tell people about it, but I also am going to try not to speak for 2 hours. So the book we're going to be talking about today is The Earth Transformed by Peter Frankopan. Context here is that I have started reading books looking at history from different lenses than you might have had in class. Think Pathogenesis, which looks at history through 8 plagues. And this was kind of next on my list. Took it out from the library. Shout out, support your local libraries. And it's taken me a while. It's a little over 6 months for me to read this, but that's because I kept getting distracted. I would read a bit and then, get distracted and then come back and read some more, but we're finally done. So this is The Earth Transformed, an Untold History by Peter Frankopan, who is a British historian and writer. He's also a professor of global history at Worcester College in Oxford, which I believe is like a constitute or an associate college with Oxford University. Hopefully it's clear that this is a nonfiction book looking at world history through the lens of science and technology. And it's described as history via climate change, and how that shaped the development and the demise of civilizations over time. And it was originally published in 2023. So, I think my key takeaways from The Earth Transformed is that it's really fascinating to consider sort of contextual factors that may or may not have come up in your regular history. Sometimes they will mention, hey, there was really bad weather, and that's why this battle did not go in so-and-so's favor. But I think that there's so much more to that, especially as we're looking historically and to less recent years, because, of course, the world is always progressing our knowledge and understanding of things over time, and how much wider circumstances impacted what we saw in the rise and fall of civilizations. I also think it's interesting because you get a little bit, unintentionally, but a little bit about how science learning and how we look at historical events through factors that are not easily or precisely measured has changed over time, and how we can sometimes go back as technology or our understanding advances and get something more precise when looking at the same factors. So think like carbon dating or being able to look at, the materials and the percentages of elements in, sampling from the planet's crust, and that can tell us something about different periods of time. And finally, it was interesting because there was this overlaid angle of looking at climatic events, major climatic events, and evaluating whether they were actually global events or regional. So there are, a number of events that might have historically been treated as, this impacted the whole world. But that wasn't always necessarily the case. So think the Black Plague was terrible. It killed many millions of people in Asia, West Asia, North Africa, Europe. But it wasn't necessarily a global event brought on by climate and environmental factors, whereas a couple of close together volcanic eruptions actually did put enough debris into the atmosphere to globally cool the temperatures for everyone. And so I thought that was an interesting way to kind of try and contextualize things that are often taught via history class or elsewhere, or used as examples of this was a really major event for the world. It's it was, but not in the way that you're thinking. It didn't have global impact in the same way that you're thinking. And as I was going through kind of the things that stood out to me in this book were very much that there were a lot of small historical events that I had no or little knowledge of, so I got to learn along the way. And that there were some pretty consistent interpretations that were not surprising, but popped up in my mind repeatedly as different scenarios and parts of history were being addressed from the lens of, climate change. Then there's a broad lack of understanding, probably driven by propaganda and popular media for history and a variety of things, that people are terrible and greed has continuously existed in such a way that corruption and nepotism and such are foundational to systems and abuses throughout history. And that's frustrating, but not surprising. And that religion just continues to baffle me when it would pop up intermittently in the book, where I was like, but this makes no sense. Why? So all said, The Earth Transformed, would I recommend it? Yes. It'll probably be slow going. It's about 650 pages. But if you have a stronger foundation and wider variety of science and history topics than I do, it might go faster for you. And I really appreciated that it had decent coverage of the world. And it wasn't just a Western-focused progress. And also, like, acknowledgements of what things like colonialism did to the wider world, which was, I think, like a great, I shouldn't say great. I appreciate that was taken into consideration, where it wasn't just like, hey, these things happened, but also here was the outcomes on both sides and the ways that there were good and bad from it, and how kind of climate and the environment played a fact in it. So, all said and done, yes, I would recommend The Earth Transformed by Peter Frankopan, and I will see you all back here next time for another 5-ish minute book review.